modalities of prayer. They say when we pray in the West, we use one or some combination of these four modes of prayer. The first is an informal prayer. It's called a colloquial prayer. I had a friend of mine who lived in the Bay Area in San Francisco that would say this informal prayer coming home from work every Friday on the interstate. Dear God, if you let me get to the Conoco station before my tank runs out of gas, I'll never let my tank get this low again. And that is an informal prayer to God. The second mode of prayer is what is called a petitionary prayer, where we petition the powers to be. We petition the angels, or we petition God. Amen. Dear God, I claim the right to heal and be healed now in all past, present, future manifestations. That would be a petitionary kind of prayer. And the third mode of prayer is a ritualistic prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep. God is great. God is good. And the fourth mode of prayer is a prayer that has no words. It's simply a meditative prayer where we become aware of a presence around us in the silence. And there's some dispute as to whether or not this is even a mode of prayer or not. This is the way Western prayer researchers typically think of prayer in our world today. And as good as those modes are, as well as they describe the way we pray, there's always been another mode, a fifth mode, that is not described in these modalities. And this is precisely what the abbot in Tibet was describing to us. He was describing a mode of prayer that's based in feeling. And he said, we must feel the feeling as if the prayer has already been answered. And in that feeling, we are speaking to the forces of creation, allowing the world to respond to us, allowing this field, the quantum hologram, the mind of God, to respond to us with what it is that we are feeling within our hearts. So, rather than praying and feeling powerless in a given situation, dear God, please let there be peace in the world. This mode of prayer invites us to feel as if we are participating in that peace, just as John Wheeler suggested, that we are part of all that we see. And as we feel the peace in our world or the healing in the bodies of our loved ones, we're actually empowering the field to mirror that back to us in a way that will bring those changes about in our lives, in our world. This is precisely what the abbot was saying to us in a monastery in Tibet. In the early 1990s, I had the opportunity to see this mode of prayer, this feeling-based prayer, enacted in a real-time situation. I'd like to share the story because it perhaps best describes what otherwise is a nebulous concept regarding precisely how feeling-based prayer works in our lives. During the 1990s, early 1990s, the desert Southwest was experiencing one of the worst droughts in history. And a Native American friend of mine invited me to join him one day in a place in the high deserts of northern Mexico, here in a prayer of rain. He didn't have to ask me twice. I said, you bet, I'd love to participate and see what this prayer is all about. So we met at an agreed upon location. We hiked through several 100,000 acres of beautiful high mountain desert sage until we came to a place that was so old. Even the people today don't know who built this place. It was essentially a stone circle. And each stone was placed just as it was by the hands of the ancestors so long ago. It was in this place that my friend began his prayer. What he did was he removed his shoes, stepped into the circle in his bare feet. He honored all of his ancestors. He simply said, all of my ancestors, all of my ancestors. Honored the four directions. He turned his back to me, held his hand in a prayer position for just a few seconds. Then he turned around and looked at me, and he said, I'm hungry. Let's go get a bite to eat. And I said, I thought you were going to share this prayer. I thought you were going to pray for rain. And he looked at me, and he said, no. He said, because if we prayed for rain, rain could never happen. Because the moment you pray for something to occur, you just acknowledge that it does not exist in that way. And I thought about what he said. It made a lot of sense to me. If I say, dear God, please let there be peace in the world, what I'm saying in that moment is that peace isn't there. And I may inadvertently be empowering the very condition that I would like to change. And the same with the healing, my body or the body of my So I asked my friend, I said, if you didn't pray for rain just then, what did you just do? What happened when you closed your eyes? And he turned her back to me just for those few moments. What he said was this. He said, when I closed my eyes, I began to feel the feeling of what it feels like to have rain in our Pueblo village. He said, I smelled the smells of what it smells like when the rain falls off the earthen walls of our buildings. And I felt the feeling of what it feels like with my naked feet in the mud. There's so much mud because there's been so much rain. And he said, in that way, I opened the door to the possibility to bring rain into our world. Well, I think about this mode of prayer a lot. Later that afternoon, something amazing happened. I was watching the weather maps, and the drought that had happened for so long suddenly changed. We saw the high pressure system move across Utah and then dip down from Colorado into northern New Mexico and make a little U-turn and come right back up. We had rain that night. We had rain all the next day. It rained and rained. I called my friend and I asked him, I said, there's so much rain, the valleys are flooding, the roads are flooding. What in the world is going on? And he was quiet just for a moment. And he said, that's the part of the prayer. He said, I never quite figured it out. So I have no way of scientifically validating that my friend's prayer had anything to do with that rain. The correlations are so high. We see it happen so many times, we know there is an effect. 1972, 24 United States cities were used to conduct an experiment where people were trained to feel the feeling of peace in a very specific manner, and they were strategically placed in these cities. Each city had populations over 10,000 people. These were documented in some of the very well-known TM studies that were done back in the early 70s. And what happened was, during the time that the people were feeling the feelings of peace, in the community around them, beyond the buildings where they were having their experience, the communities experienced statistically measurable reductions in crime. Violent crimes against people, traffic accidents declined. In some cities like Chicago, where the stock exchange is, the stock market soared while peace was in place. And when they stopped their prayers, all those statistics reversed. And they did this time and time again to such a degree that the effect could be measured, and it was applied in an even greater experiment that was documented in the Journal of Conflict Resolution, 1988. And this was the experiment that was called the International Peace Project in the Middle East. What happened during the Israeli-Lebanese War in the early 1980s, as a result of these earlier studies, people who were trained to feel the feelings of peace were positioned throughout the war-torn areas in Israel and Lebanon. And during the time, what the researchers called the window, the prayer window, when they were feeling, people were trained to feel the feelings of peace in their hearts. When they were feeling those feelings, terrorist activities dropped to zero. Crimes against people declined. Emergency hospital visits declined. And they tried doing these experiments different times of day, different days of the week, to make sure it wasn't an effect of weeks or weekends or holidays, or different times of the month to make sure it wasn't an effect of lunar cycles affecting people. And when the studies were complete, what they found, although we may not know precisely why this effect happens the way it happens, we know the correlations are so high that when a certain number of people begin to feel the feeling of peace or healing in their bodies in one place, the effect carries into the community beyond the place where these people are. And it is so precise that we now know, and statisticians were able to determine precisely the number of people that are required to kickstart, to jumpstart this kind of an effect. So I'll share the formula, and then I'll describe what that formula means. The effect is first noticed when a certain number of people are participating. And that number, the minimum number, is the square root of 1% of a given population. So what does that mean? If you have a city of 1 million people, for example, you take 1% of 1 million, a little calculator, and then you take the square root of whatever that 1% was. And that number tells you how many people are necessary, the threshold number, to begin the effect. Obviously, the more people that participate, the greater the effect. For a city of 1 million people, that number is only about 100. In a world of 6 billion people, square root of 1% of the given population is only about 8,000 people. 8,000 people, according to these studies, are the number of people, that's all that's required, to feel the feelings of peace in their hearts in a given moment in time, simultaneously, to kickstart, to jumpstart that consciousness linked through the field, as we know the field exists today, before that peace is felt in the world around us. So any discussion regarding this feeling-based prayer, this lost art of prayer, sometimes seems a little more than academic until we can actually apply it in our lives or see it applied in our lives. It's the late 1990s, I had the opportunity to do precisely that. When I saw the footage documenting the healing of a life-threatening condition within the body of a living woman using precisely the kinds of techniques that we're speaking about right now. For me, it was this kind of information that took this lost modality of prayer out of the realm of academics into something that's very real that we can apply in our lives. I had the opportunity during that time to see some video footage of the healing of a 3-inch diameter bladder cancer inside the body of a woman who, by Western medical standards, had been diagnosed inoperable. She had gone, as a last resort, to a medicineless hospital in Beijing, China. It was in this medicineless hospital where they began simply by addressing the life-affirming ways that she could change how she was living her life. They taught her life-affirming ways to breathe and life-affirming ways to nourish her body, gentle movements to stimulate the energy centers in her body. And as she was doing these and strengthening her body, at one point it made sense to undergo a process. Now I'd like to share this, I'd like to describe it to you as a very potent example of how the feeling world inside of our bodies has a direct effect, in this case a very graphic effect on the world beyond our bodies. So in the video documentation, the film shows a woman lying on in a hospital room. She's fully awake, she's fully conscious, she believes in the process that's about to happen. Before her, there is an ultrasound technician who is running an ultrasound line over her lower abdomen that we can see on a split screen television. And on the left-hand side of the screen, they do a snapshot, a freeze frame of an instant in time for reference. The condition looked like in that instant in time. On the right-hand side of the screen, we are able to watch real time as 3 practitioners stand behind her, working with the energy in her body and with the feelings in their bodies. And what they do is they begin to chant a word that to them they've agreed upon, that reinforces the feeling within them that she's already healed. The chant essentially says already healed, already done. And as they begin to have this feeling and to say these words among themselves, on the computer screen, on the television screen, we can watch in real time this cancerous tumor as it disappears in less than 3 minutes real time. It's not like time lapse on a documentary where you see a rose unfold in 30 seconds and it's something that normally takes days. This literally happens in less than 3 minutes. Her body responded to the feelings of the practitioners who were trained to have the kind of feelings they were having. And all they were feeling was the feeling of what it feels like to be in the presence of a woman who is already healed, fully enabled, fully capacitated. They were not seeing her as a woman who was sick, and they weren't saying, bad cancer, you've got to go away. It's a very, very different way of thinking about things. It's a very graphic example of precisely how this principle works. I had the opportunity to speak to the gentleman, Luke Chin, that actually created this film. And I asked him a question. I said, what if those 3 practitioners weren't there? I said, could this woman have done this? Could any of us do this on our own? And he smiled at me when I asked him the question. He said, Greg, in all probability, she probably could have done it alone. However, there's something about us humans in that we seem to feel more empowered and stronger when we're supported by others in the things that we believe in, the things that we choose to accomplish. So while she probably could have had this feeling and done it herself, having these three practitioners work with her was the threshold that it took for her body to respond. All they were doing was having the feeling as if she were already healed, and in less than 3 minutes her body responded. What Western physics now is beginning to tell us is that the same energy, the same field that led to the healing in this woman's body also leads to peace between nations. It's the same thing, different scale, same principle. And I've been involved in experiments where hundreds of thousands of people joined together through the World Wide Web. We were coordinated on the internet in a given hour of time, a window of time, when we were trained to feel the feelings of peace in our bodies during that time. And when we did that, statistically, what happened in events around the world, there were wartime events. There were bombings, aerial bombings in Iraq that were scheduled, that were reversed during the window of time when this prayer was happening. Crimes against people declined. Emergency hospital room visits declined. There was a computer research project at Princeton University that was able to document the field of consciousness on a global level while these prayers were going on. And they saw a little glitch, a glyph on the screen indicating that consciousness was responding to hundreds of thousands of people feeling the feeling of peace in the moment that it was occurring. And what this tells us is that the field we're working with is a measurable field. You can pick it up with equipment that can be measured on the computer screen. This was part of the research project at Princeton University that was called the Global Consciousness Project. So the field is real, it's out there, and it responds to us in ways now that we're only beginning to understand. Even more recently, the research has been done by the scientist Masaru Emoto regarding the relationship between human emotion, human feeling, and water drops, is showing this relationship even more poignantly. What has happened is that these scientists, this particular research project, has discovered that droplets of water that make up over 70% of our world anyway, and 70% of our bodies, that these droplets of water respond to human emotion, whether it is felt in the body or as it is actually written on labels that are placed on the vials of water, and the emotion of the researcher as the labels are being written and placed onto those vials. The vials are then frozen for a specific period of time, removed from the freezing process, and as they begin to thaw, they crystallize. And the crystals are the telltale sign of what is happening with the emotion. For example, they've taken water, highly polluted, highly toxic water, from some of the most polluted dams in the center of Japan. This water has never been known to crystallize. They just can't get it to crystallize. So when you look at it under a microscope, what you see, it's a very muddy, very nebulous form. There's no symmetry. There's no crystalline structure whatsoever before the emotions are in place. After the emotions are there, for example, when 500 people pray over some of this most polluted water, the before image shows the water in its toxic state. The after image of the same water shows this water beautifully formed, beautifully clear, beautifully crystalline, perfectly symmetrical, purely from the result of human emotion interacting and human feeling interacting with this field of water. Some of the other research has shown families where children and their parents have encircled a vial of water in a room that has never been found to crystallize. Again, some of the very highly polluted and toxic water. And what they do, they make a game out of it. The children, they send love to the water. They say, we love you, water. We appreciate you, water. Thank you, water, for what you bring to our world and our lives. And in that innocence, they are eliciting these genuine states of emotion. And as the research continues, it is precisely these vials of water that have received this kind of energy from the children and their families, feelings that the ancients called prayer, that the water begins to crystallize into beautiful, symmetrical, very clear forms, showing once again that there's a direct effect between what we feel in our bodies and what's happening in the world beyond our bodies. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, very poignant example of how each of us has an opportunity to participate, not to control and manipulate, but rather participate in the events of our world, the events of our lives, our families, our communities, and our bodies through the field